Okay.
Yeah, there's 74 people on, so 73.
All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to part 2 of our successful strategies and supports for parents living with ID and DD. This is our building blocks for an effective program. I think we need a slide. I'm looking at a green slate. I think, do we have a slide? I'm Sue Jones, and I'm the Department Director of Youth and Family Services Department of the United Arc, and I'd like to welcome you back to part 1. Really appreciated your attendance last time and welcoming you back. And if you didn't attend part 1 but are here today, welcome you as well. And you're interested in the topic of successfully supporting parents living with ID and DD. The PowerPoint and handouts were sent to you at the end of the last session and will be done the same this week. Thank you again for filling out the evaluations. Really helped us in developing today's session. Special thanks to Carrie Mahoney of ARCA Mass and ARCA Mass for hosting this. And Carrie, do you have anything you want to add? Carrie, you have anything you want to add around technology? Okay.
Mahoney.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carrie Mahoney from the ARC of Mass. So I'm providing kind of the technical assistance. If you're having any issues, just chat it in. So at this point, you've all been muted upon entry because we're recording this session, and it will make for a better quality recording. So, and then I believe you folks are going to be taking questions at the end, so just chat them in. Thanks.
Right, we do have a couple of different times, but you'll be prompted to use the chat feature. So again, the webinar series is a partnership of the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Developmental Services, the Children's Trust, ARCA Mass, and the community programs of Communitas and the United Arc, which both programs continue to provide services for parents with ID and DD. This work group has merged into the statewide Mass Partnership for Supporting Parents with ID and DD. And the goal is being enhance the system's capacity and competence in supporting parents living with ID and DD across the Commonwealth. Slide. Our presenters from part 1 are back with us today, Judy SantaMaria and Paula Thompson, both from Communitas, and Betsy, Misch, and myself, Sue Jones from the United Arc. In addition, we'll also be joined by Margaret Van Gelder, State Director of the Family Supportive Department of Developmental Services, and Tara Diorio Thomas, Program Stabilization's Operations Coordinator of the Mass Department of Children and Families. Slide. The objectives for today are to explore perceptions and strength-based work for this population, to learn about specific cases and the ways in which supportive services were effective at creating positive change, and to understand the service sector need for statewide capacity. So before we begin, I'd just like to mention last week the importance of talking about building that relationship in order to work more successfully for parents. One of the ways that we can do that is recognizing that there may be perceptions and assumptions many of us may not recognize or may be perceived as having. Or perhaps we see something in coworkers and definitely society and also in the parents that we work with. So usually during a presentation, I would stand up and ask folks while I write down on a whiteboard what they may think, some of the professionals or society, some perceptions that they may have regarding parents having and raising children. And I would write down what the answers were. Usually it'd be anywhere from 10 to 12. And then we would review them. And then next, I would ask, what do you think parents may think of social systems and the professionals? And again, we would write them down and we would review them. See, we're not going to do that exercise today. What I did was take the top 4 consistent answers, and we're going to look at those now. Slide. I'm sorry, the next one. There we go. So under the professionals, we have, and these are pretty consistent. Unfit to be parent, can't take care of themselves, children will be smarter than parents, won't keep the children safe, parents feel going to take my children away, think I'm stupid, here to tell me what to do, just fix it. Well, as we can see, those are both pretty negative sides. Both sides are pretty negative perceptions as assumptions. Parents are aware how society, sometimes even their families, and some professionals feel about them being parents. When working with parents, I think it would be great if we could remember what we learned last week, that according to research, parents do have the capacity to learn, to grow, to parent, and like all parents, do need some supports. And this will go a long way in helping to build that relationship. Slide. Carrie, want to do the slide, the next one? Oh, you did. Thank you. I'm sorry. You're quick. So these are things, these are facts, issues that parents face every single day. They face societal and social service bias, which can lead into the presumption of incompetence, professional emphasis on limitations, because the system right now is crisis driven and long-term supports are not usually and readily available. May have lack of trust in the service system and providers, because many of the parents that we work with themselves have had experience within the foster care systems, challenges in schools, various service systems, and also have the fear of their own child being removed. And again, because we heard last week, the reality is 80% of all custody cases are cases that the parent has an intellectual or developmental disability. The last one is being held to a higher standard than other parents, literally parenting under a microscope, which reminds me of a situation. I worked with a family, and they lived in a complex, and the mom, and there was a swing in the backyard, and the mom was out with a child, and the child was on the swing and fell off the swing and bruised his arm and got a scrape on the leg, and she went to the doctors, and a lot of questions were asked, and the next thing she knew, her social worker was at the door wanting to know what happened. Her neighbor also had a similar situation where her child also, got hurt on the playground. However, social services did not show up to their door. They were not questioned. And they feel and expressed to me that, again, it feels so much like living under a microscope that even everyday common occurrences with children are questioned more deeply than with typical parents. So again, if we can acknowledge that and provide some empathy towards that, that will go a long way in helping us, again, develop that working relationship. Slide. Next, we're going to have Judy talk to us about using a strength-based model approach. Part of the presentation will include an exercise where you'll be prompted to be able to participate by using the chat feature. Judy?
Yes, thanks, Sue. Next slide, please, Carrie. I'm Judy SantaMaria, the Director of Family Support at Communitas, and I'm going to talk about the strengths-based perspective. Simply, the strengths-based perspective is recognizing a client's strengths and using them to guide your practice and your work to meet your goals. Interestingly enough, when I was putting together this presentation, I looked at a PowerPoint that I had put together from 2009 and found that I had also concentrated on the strengths-based perspective then. I really like the definition that I have here because I think it delves deeper and prompts you to further explore family strengths. So strengths orientation means everything you do is based on helping to discover, embellish, explore, and exploit the client's strengths and resources. Most of our work is home-based work, and I use that time that I get into the car from the agency to the client's home to really look at what their strengths are and how I'm going to nurture those strengths in order to meet the goal. So next we're going to do a strengths-based exercise. I hope people enjoy it. I don't know if they've done it before, but it helps to flip the mindset from looking at what's wrong with a family to what's right. Betsy's going to help me and would like to recognize what's happening here that is really a strength. People can chat in their answers and we'll keep track of them, comment on them. We'll do the exercise for about 5 minutes. I'm very competitive, so I asked Sue and Betsy what has been the upper limit with this exercise, and they had said 46. And I noticed someone just typed in food. Yeah, the kids have toys. You're way ahead of me. There's a dad who looks like he's working. Two-parent family, which is one of the indicators of success. Dad is showing affection to his son, and it looks like there's an active father role. This child is definitely connecting with dad. How are we doing? They have a house, basic needs. The utilities are on, mom's watching something. Any more? Fruit and vegetables, yeah, I noticed that on the counter. There looks like apples, pears, grapes. They have a good diet. The kids have books. I just missed the last one. There is kitty litter. Yeah, they have a cat. So they have an animal. I can't see this cat, but maybe other people can. There's a book on a chair, yes, and the book on the floor. And it looks like dad has just come from work. So hopefully they have an income. They have access to medicine. Yeah, there's pictures on the wall, something that we frequently miss, but they have pride in their household. TV, entertainment, yeah. Yeah, it looks like dad's working, just coming in from work or going out. Notes on the fridge, yeah, organization. Mm-hmm. The house foundation looks stable. You're better than me. Yeah. Groceries. Oh, there is a laundry machine to the side. So hopefully the clothes are clean. Skateboard for extracurricular. Yeah. Books. Education seems important. Mom does seem relaxed. quite relaxed, actually. They have a phone. Looks like they have hobbies. Yeah, it does. Skateboarding. Any other ideas? And I don't know where we are, Betsy. These ideas came in fast and furious.
Oh, I have no idea. I'm going to count right now. I'm going to try.
There is a hot meal on the table. They have a phone. There's a knife on the table, but I noticed that it was at least out of the baby's reach. Yeah, they do have what looks like a humidifier or an air purifier, which might be very important. Clothing, food, clothing, shelter.
16, 17.
Music. There is music.
20, 21.
The house does look lived in. I love that. It does. It looks like they're very comfortable. Yeah, they have a cat.
7, 8. I think we're about 30. I'm seeing
good.
some people said disorganized. I'm not sure if that's a strength. Although, you know, people live in different types of situations, right?
Yeah. The rug, and if someone just mentioned that mom was smoking, yes, it might be a cigar, but it does look like she has an ashtray there. So there is plenty of food. Have we missed anything? Oh, bottles. Yeah, there are a couple of bottles used for the baby. The baby has a diaper on.
All the kids have clothes on.
Yeah, everyone's clothes.
Well, everybody has clothes on, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think this may seem obvious, but obviously they have money. Somebody's potentially working and or they're supporting a household, so they have income. Yeah, so I think we're about over 30. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're great. Thanks. And I hope people do use that. The kids do look clean and dressed. Oh, yeah.
Judy, this is Sue. I think I mentioned to you that this is one of the things that we use when we're interviewing new staff to see if they can find some of the strengths And our criteria is folks need to be able to come up with 10 in order to come back for their second interview. It's been a very helpful tool in a lot of ways.
Paula and I have said that we were going to start introducing it because sometimes new staff go into families' homes and are just overwhelmed and don't see the strengths. Okay, thanks. I hope people use this and the next time they're confronted with a situation that looks overwhelming, just have a visual of something's positive there. Next slide, Carrie. So we wanted to get more serious and talk about the principles of strength-based practice, that every individual, group, family, and community has strengths. And I think that we all see that and feel like we live that way. And I just talked to one of my clients yesterday who's a parent with an intellectual disability. When I met her, she lived in a very cluttered home. She still does live in a very cluttered home. And she told me that she couldn't read and that she had learning disabilities. She has 2 boys, one with autism and the other who has a very medically complex issue. But yesterday when I talked to her, she was rebuilding bikes and donating them to communities that didn't have them. So although she identifies herself as, and does identify herself as a parent with intellectual disabilities, she also really looks at her strengths and capitalizes on them. The next principle is that trauma, abuse, illness, and struggle may be injurious, but they may also be sources of challenge and opportunity. And in the first part of this webinar, the part 1, I spoke about a man named Dave who grew up in the Fernald School. Dave has gone on to be very, very successful and has used his background, the abuse that he experienced, and he talked about that abuse, to really move on. He's a very strong father, a very strong community member. I've really learned a lot from Dave. Third principle is assume that you do not know the upper limits of the capacity to grow and change, and that the individual, group, or community take the individual's group or community aspirations seriously. I think we have to remember that parents can do versus can't do, and that we don't know the upper limits of their capacity or their upper limits of their strengths until we really get to know them. And as if looking back on the definition, really exploit their strengths. The next principle is that we best serve our clients by collaborating with them. And we're going to talk about case examples next. And my case example features a woman who grew up in a residential school. She was always told what to do. When she left, she lived with her mom who told her what to do. When we started working with her, I think she thought we were going to tell her what to do, and we really didn't have much success until we began working with her. The next principle is that every environment is full of resources. And this tells me think of a community in Somerville, Mass. I don't know if people are familiar with Somerville, but I was working with a woman who was living in a very large federal housing project. And I think when I first entered the housing project, what I saw was gang activities, drugs, and a lot of poverty. But come to find out that in this housing project, there was a community center. The community center offered school, it offered after-school programming, computer classes, both childcare, as I said, but then groups for parents to meet and talk about their children. It was just a really supportive environment, and I thought, wow, why didn't I have that? You know, what a really nice resource. The next point is that caring, caretaking, and context is really important. In the context that you're caring for your child, are you caring for your child alone? Are you caring for your child within a group? You know, what kind of support do you have, and what kind of support can we help you find? And then the last principle is understanding culture and diversity. And I have been very, very fortunate over the past many years to work with many families in the Latino community. And what I am always just, I'm always excited to be a guest in their home, and incredibly impressed with the strength of the family and the strength of the extended family, and the role that a parent who may have a disability continues to play within the extended family. So understanding culture and diversity is just such an important piece of strength-based practice. Thanks, Sue. Next slide. Okay, move on.
Thanks, Judy. Next thing we're going to go into are some case studies. Paula, Betsy, and Judy are each going to be presenting a case looking at the parent, the challenges, the strategies, and the results. And I believe, Paula, you're going to start.
Yes, thank you, Sue. Starting with talking about Stephanie. She is in her late 20s. She completed high school and then moved away to kind of get away from her family and take a break from her family. She is the mom of a 5-month-old girl. Her daughter was removed from the hospital and has been in foster care ever since. She does work full-time at Panera, where she has a great relationship with her boss. She takes the bus to get there every day. She lives with her boyfriend, who is a gang member, and 2 YouTubers. The YouTubers will not allow her to have home visits. She's able to complete all concrete tasks on her service plan. She never misses a visit and brings all the necessary items to her visit. She talks about how much she loves her daughter often. And Stephanie talks about her sister, and will sometimes FaceTime her sister during the visits, and her nephew. She'll also FaceTime with her dad. We had to put in some limits on using video for a 5-month-old, but we were able to work on that skill with providing some education. Stephanie hasn't talked to her mom during services since before the birth of her daughter. And she knows that her mom could be a resource, but struggles to reach back out to her. Over the course of the 7 months that we're working with her, she invites her mom to a supervised visit at DCF, and then eventually moves back in with her mom. This took a lot of dedication on both of their parts. Next. The challenge with Stephanie was that she wasn't able to read her daughter's cues. It seemed like her daughter could be slightly delayed and was not cueing when she was hungry or needed to be changed or was tired. But also, even the limited clues she did give, mom really had a hard time reading. And Stephanie was also struggling with the feeding schedule and making sure that the entire bottle got finished. She just didn't see why it had to get finished. But her daughter had failure to thrive, and so making sure she had appropriate calories was very important. Next. And so here's some of the strategies that we used. And I must say, I was thinking as I was going over these strategies, these were the things that were successful. With this mom, we tried a lot of the traditional schedules, feeding schedules, prompting what's next schedule, first this happens and then this happens, and they just weren't successful for her. She wasn't making the progress. So what we had to do was kind of change it up and look at some other strategies that we often use, but how could we specifically meet her learning needs? And so what we did was we got a bunch of pictures from Google Images of what babies might be doing or thinking. You can almost think of like facial, for somebody with autism, what is that person feeling? But we did this with babies. We did it as a matching game. We did it like 2 or 3 times, and she really got it. The child is actually 5 months old, not 5 years old. So that's the difference. And then we did a lot of repetition about how babies eat, why they need to eat, and the importance of their nutrition. This was a constant conversation, kind of like a spiral. So we would touch on something each week, and then we would add to it. And this really worked very well for this mom. We also used some YouTube videos and the All Babies Cry videos from Children's Trust. And I think what these videos did, for some people, they're really teaching tools. We always use videos that are from hospitals or early intervention agencies. This normalized it for her. She didn't think it was me telling her that she had to do it. It was seeing that a whole bunch of people were suggesting that this was what was in her daughter's best interest, and that she wasn't the only one who struggled with these things. It kind of changed that power dynamic a little bit as well. We also use some aspects of the Tim Chuck curriculum that is listed at the end of the PowerPoint. This is a health and safety curriculum, and it has many visuals. And you can look at pictures similar to what we looked at and say, what is unsafe? What is safe? And again, for some parents, this is a real learning tool. For this mom, it was a way to build her confidence and a way to build her success. So we did many aspects of that. And then there was also the engagement of natural supports. So engaging in her mom and knowing that I didn't want to lose her trust, but I also wanted to engage her mom so that maybe this could be a possibility for reunification with this family. And the grandma was great, but she also had raised 3 kids of her own and said, like, this is the way I think we should do things, and I'm not quite sure why I should listen to you. So it was a lot of give and take, you know, and I just went back to strategies that were endorsed by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the CDC, and we went back and forth and talked about what made sense for her granddaughter and her daughter. And this really did work out in the end. It just took a little bit of give and take. Next. So the result was that there was a plan for reunification. This was not the plan when services originally began. Adoption was the plan. There was increased visitation both outside the DCF office, in her grandmother's house, to the point that it became unsupervised. So maybe she would be with her daughter, with her mom home for 3 hours, and I would come for the final hour, or some creative strategies. And then also, I think we hear a lot that it's great that people can, you know, learn one strategy of a developmental stage, but they can't bring it to the next stage for parents with ID. But that wasn't true in this situation. We had worked so hard on the importance of feeding and the feeding schedule that when her daughter transitioned from solely bottles to bottles and food, she was able to transfer those skills. So they might have been took a little longer to learn, but she was able to learn them and then transfer those skills as well. Next.
Hi, everybody. I guess that's me. So Betsy Misch, I'm the program manager for the Positive Parenting Program for the United Arc. Nice to see everyone again. So I'm going to talk about Bill and his family. So Bill's a single dad in his late 20s. He has 2 children, 4 and 6. Dad is living with an intellectual disability as well as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Both of Bill's children were suspected of having disabilities, but neither had DDS at the time of service when I was working with them. Both of the kids did have IEPs in school, and the youngest was diagnosed with autism. The older child had an IEP for an intellectual disability. The child was behind in reading and math. And the older child also had an in-home therapist who worked with her on anger and aggression issues. Both children were very active. Dad did a great job of taking them outside for activities. He was quite an outdoorsman. He used to take them hiking, fishing, outdoor parks, all sorts of stuff. Bill managed his money on his own independently. He had no repayee, and he was able to meet most of his children's basic needs with the challenge of affordable housing. So his primary struggle was securing affordable housing. Bill's income was from SSI disability and a part-time job. He had a number of part-time jobs, but he really felt like it was important for him to be working, and I think that gave him a little bit of extra money as well that he appreciated. But his income did not allow him to pay for market rent. He was on several housing lists, including Section 8, but he was years away from a housing slot when I met them. Bill's parents, who had helped Bill and his, with his children on a regular basis, decided they would sell their one-family home and buy a duplex where Bill and his children could live as well. This was a creative and generous move for Bill's parents. However, challenges did ensue. Bill and his parents struggled to communicate. They were still in the parent-child relationship mode. His parents felt like they really had to take care of Bill, and Bill felt like they should take care of him and they should take care of his children. Next slide, please, Carrie. One of the major challenges that arose was that Bill would let his children get up and go downstairs to his parents in the early morning. This benefited Bill because his children rose early and he didn't want to get out of bed. So if the kids were downstairs with his parents, he could sleep in a little bit later. It became clear that Bill and his parents were not communicating around this issue. So communication between the two parties was the focus of my work for probably, I want to say, 3 months. I met with Bill and his parents weekly when the kids were at school, and we really just discussed and talked about the expectations of individual family members and what they were willing to do or not do for each other. Whenever we had these conversations, Bill's attention would wander, and he would get very antsy and want to leave the conversation. I think this was the reason it took so long. I think also, mediating between parents and children, and moving from the child relationship to more of like a co-housing relationship, I think is difficult stuff. So I think they did the best they could. Next slide, Carrie. The contract we came up with, so primarily we were writing rules and expectations for the family, and we came up with a family contract. And this was not, going down to the parents' house at 5 a.m. was not the only rule we worked on. I'm going to say that most of the rules had to do with something around boundaries and space. Dad would sometimes go down to his parents' house when they were not home. He would take food out of the fridge without permission. He'd just kind of hang out in their house. I'm not sure why when they weren't there. This was really challenging for his parents. They felt like he had his own home, they had their own home, and they needed to maintain that space. So in relation to the early morning visits, the family eventually agreed that on the days when the kids had school, Bill would go down with the children, but after they were dressed and had breakfast. So he would go down right before they were ready to go to school. They would say hi to their grandparents, and then off they would go. On the weekends, however, grandparents seemed a little bit more flexible. They were willing to have the kids come down on the weekend, but not until 8 a.m. So this gave them a little bit more time before the kids were down there. And it also allowed Dad to kind of, hang out or sleep in or do whatever he was going to do without the kids for a few hours. The schedule was really reinforced by myself, grandparents, the oldest child's therapist, and the school. The oldest child's therapist really worked on boundaries with the child and how to be a good neighbor. The school helped as well, really, by putting together a visual schedule similar to the one that the youngest child was using. It was an icon schedule, and we felt that because the youngest child was 4, that we would use the system he was most comfortable with at school to try to translate that into the home. The routine was posted on the dad's front door, so the children could see it if they attempted to leave the house. The other piece of technology that we used was an alarm. So we used a door alarm on the front door. So this alerted Dad if the children attempted to leave the house or left the house while he was in the other room. Next slide, please. So it took a couple of weeks for the children and Dad to really follow the new schedule. For the most part, I'm going to say it was successful. The children did not go to their grandparents every day, although I can't say the behavior was completely gone, but it was greatly reduced. Bill's parents were much happier with their decision to go house with their son and their grandchildren, and I really feel like their relationship improved. I think they had better communication skills and also listening skills. So that was really positive. This positive change included many players, again, including myself through DCF support and stabilization services, extended family, public school system, therapeutic interventions, as well as Bill and his children. The family case is a good example of how natural supports worked with formalized paid supports to not only preserve housing for the family, but also to improve the long-term communication skills, with the hope that Bill and his parents will be able to build upon these skills so they could continue to live together and be supportive of one another in the long run. Because certainly Bill helped his parents as well. I mean, he mowed the lawn, he took out the trash. You know, his parents were aging. And so I think that Bill was also really helpful to them. So by improving the entire situation, hopefully, again, that we could help them maintain over the long term. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. We are going to have questions after the next case, and the next case is Jess, and Judy's going to talk about Jess.
Thanks, Betsy. I'm going to talk about Jess. I chose this particular case because I had highlighted transition between the Department of Children and Families and the Department of Developmental Services. Children's Trust is thrown in there, as well as and services that are provided through the Department of Public Health. So Jess is actually 32 now. We met her at age 23. She was a single parent with intellectual disabilities when she gave, at 23, when she gave birth to Eric. It's interesting to note, and I said this earlier, that she grew up in a residential school and was placed in the residential school at age 8. She returned home to live with her mom at age 22. She did not want to live in a community home. So Jess and Eric were living with Jess's mom at the time of the referral to Communitas Successful Parenting Program. So that is a program provided through the Department of Children and Families Support and Stabilization. The initial referral was to assist Jess in learning basic parenting skills. Well, it wasn't very successful, and Eric was removed from Jess's care and placed with Jess's sister, Amy, during this period of time. And the initial successful parenting service was closed. DCF later reintroduced services when Eric was physically returned to Jess 6 months later. Next slide, please. Our challenge was that Jess had few, if any, parenting skills, and she and her mom, with whom she lived, were not interested in engaging in services, especially as Eric was removed from Jess's care when services were last in place. Next slide, please. Strategies used, and it was difficult to build trust with Jess and her mom, but that we had to start there. We really had to start building trust. And after that, to do that, there were referrals made to some concrete services. WIC, early intervention. Eric was later diagnosed with autism. And DDS eligibility for both Jess and Eric. This went a long way. We used the picture-based curriculum. It's called Step-by-Step Parenting. Paula, you could look up how to get that. By Maurice Feldman. And by using the picture-based curriculum, we really just didn't read, and we weren't insulting her or even bringing up the possibility of reading, which is something that would have further wounded her. We engaged the entire family in services and recognized the strength of the entire family. Although Jess was our primary client, and Jess and Eric, we worked with her mom and her sister. And well, you'll find out later that her sister has co-custody, but it was really important that Jess was our primary client. And during this period of time, there was also a referral to a parenting group for parents with intellectual disabilities. Coincidentally, it was in the same city where Jess lived, so Jess and her mother could easily get to the group, and the group was funded through Children's Trust. Next slide, please. So the results, they're long. We've worked with Jess for 9 years now. Their shared legal custody was awarded to Jess and her sister Amy. Amy oversees all medical and educational decisions. And so we continue to work with the entire family. Jess and Eric continue to live with Jess's mom. DCF services were closed, as were successful parenting services, but there was a very careful transition to services provided through the Department of Developmental Services. We also changed case managers at that point, which I think was a really good move, because the initial case manager, I think, Jess identified as providing DCF services. Jess receives ongoing navigation now through Communitas Family Support Center. And I talked to the case manager yesterday to ask, what they do work on. They work on a lot of concrete interventions, SSI, Mass Health, but the case manager also serves as a cheerleader. Right now, the family needs to move from their housing. They live at the top of a very steep hill and on the 3rd floor, which is difficult for all members of the family. Jess does not want to leave because of fear of the unknown. She knows how to get from one place to another. School is right around the corner. The hospital is located across the street. She knows the whole transportation system. So right now, the case manager is working with Jess to encourage her to explore, and will work with her to explore the new neighborhood so that she is as confident as she is living where she lives right now. At age 3, Eric was referred to the DDS Ifs Program. We call it the Ifs Program, the Intensive Flexible Family Support Program through Communitas. Behavioral services were put in that place. For those people who aren't familiar with the Ifs service, it's support for families and members of families who are experiencing challenges that could put them at risk for residential placement. At age 6, Eric became eligible and began to receive services through the DDS Children's Autism Waiver. I had mentioned that he had autism. And in order to qualify for that program, you must be eligible for Mass Health Standard. And it provides one-to-one intervention to help children who exhibit behaviors or communication problems, social problems. Eric had a lot of communication problems. He communicates very well now. He also had a lot of behavioral problems, and this program has been very effective. Eric will age out of this program in October. The family continues to live together. Next slide. Paula, I think you're going to take it from here. Look, you're mute.
I think we're gonna.
Here we go. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I think we're gonna take some questions if people have questions around the case studies that we just talked about. You could just chat them in, or.
This is Margaret, if I can just speak since I'm unmuted. So I'm kind of curious, and these were great examples in terms of really, illustrating the kind of coordination and collaboration across different funding agencies and programs and services. But it really seems like a consistent theme, at least in these situations, was the role of the natural family, as well as part of the support system, and ultimately some sort of a co-parenting or co-housing or co-living situation. So I'm just kind of curious if any of you can comment, how frequent that is, if that's kind of one of the typical approaches or strategies, or just what your experience is with that.
It was kind of funny because we didn't even realize it until maybe yesterday, and we said, oh geez, all of these families had extended natural supports, right? I think that it is something that we do come in contact with a lot. I'm going to say the most of my families have support from their families. Sometimes it's not the best relationship. Sometimes if the parent we're working with let's say their parent was involved with DCF, right? So there could have been some trauma and abuse in their own life. So sometimes the relationship with their parent is not appropriate. But sometimes there's a sister, like both Judy and Paula's cases, they had siblings that were helpful. In my case, there were no siblings that were super helpful. It was really just the parents. But I think a lot of our families have people in their lives that we could potentially utilize as positive supports. But again, like I mentioned with Bill, often there has to be family work done within those situations, at least in my experience.
I think parent support is an indicator of if it's going to be successful long term, but like Betsy mentioned, that might be a community member or a friend, or somebody else who takes an interest. It's kind of the sharing of different supports, and we're going to talk about that a little bit next in Charting the Life course.
Mm-hmm. In the last session, we talked about, we had the video at the end around the Thornton family. So the Thorntons did not have family support at all. But the one support that they did have was a caseworker that they had, I can't remember if it was both of them were assigned to the same worker or but it was post leaving the institution, they were assigned like a community support person. And that person stayed with them until today. I mean, their child is in their 30s and she's still in their life. And, she did that as a service provider, and that's really wonderful. I know we all can't be in that role for families, but I think for them, it was really successful.
It's interesting, some of the research way back in the very beginning that came out of England, I believe it was Tim and Wendy Booth. That's one of the things that they highlighted. If there is an individual, it doesn't have to be a family member, a community member, a neighbor, right, a teacher, anything like that can really just improve the chances of success for the family tremendously.
Yeah, because I think that the natural supports can do things like translating mass health forms, can help with organization. It doesn't have to be a live-in situation per se, but somebody that they can call and say, hey, I'm having a super stressful day, what should I do? Or somebody who can provide some childcare, right, on a limited basis. But childcare is a big deal too. If you need a break, if you're a single parent and you have no supports, that's going to be a little bit harder than if you've got a friend or a neighbor or friends of your kids, right? So other parents who are parenting who can support you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I liked what you brought in there, Betsy, that yes, it is parenting and that is our primary focus, but you brought up a great point. A lot of our folks that we work with need help with reading the mail, understanding the mail, because if they don't, there's so many consequences that can just really roll when that doesn't happen, missing housing appointments or recertifications or things like that. And so that is definitely a really important piece of trying to get some of those supports, either paid or non-paid, with our folks.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that can be the only piece, and parents are successful in parenting as long as they pay their bills and read their mail and don't miss anything.
Right. I think that is some of the stuff we see. I mean, I think we see a lot of neglect cases with the folks that we work with intellectual disabilities. That's what a lot of the research kind of points to. And so those are things around, not having stable housing, not having food stamps, right? Not having enough food, not having enough structure, boundaries, or routines in their household. I can't say that for sure, but that's what most of the research is suggesting. And so things like mass health, right? Not having health insurance for your kids is a big deal, because if they're not seeing the doctor, that's a big deal. So I definitely agree with Judy. Some of the case management stuff is just as critical, and sometimes that's it. That's all that they need.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you.
Move on.
All right, well, thank you. Or if you think of questions, please feel free to reach out. Paula's now going to be talking to us and giving us an instruction and overview on ways to identify and find supports through the Integrated STAR, which is from Charting the Life course. Paula?
Thanks so much, Sue. I'm very proud and honored to be able to talk about this part of our presentation today, as Massachusetts is a community of practice along with 20 other states. Let's go into the next slide. This is a framework that is created to help individuals and families of all abilities and all ages develop a vision of a good life. Think about what they need to know and what they need to do. Identifying how to find or develop supports and discover what it takes to live the lives they want to live. So one really nice feature about this framework is that it applies wonderfully for our parents with intellectual disabilities. You'll see how this could be another strategy, but also it could fit for your family, for your child, for people with and without disabilities. I think another great aspect of this is that sometimes as service providers, we can be kind of translators where a family needs one thing and the system calls it something else. And now that we're developing this common language between state agencies, I think that will be really helpful and really help empower families a little bit more. So currently the Department of Developmental Services is using the Charting the Life course framework, the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Public Health, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Mass Rehab Coalition. So it's great to see that we are moving in a direction of common language. And there are many aspects of this framework. And I encourage you to go and take a look on the Charting the Life course website. There are many great instructional videos, handouts, and different things so that you can learn more about it. And like many things that we've discussed in both part 1 and part 2 of this webinar, it could be an 8-hour course just on Charting the Life course. So I'm just going to try to do it justice in a few short moments. Next. So today we're going to just focus on the integrated support STAR. And what this does is I'll just take you around the STAR very briefly, and then we're going to watch a video and see a couple of different examples. And so, going back to what Judy had said about personal strengths and assets, what are somebody's abilities? How can we build on those so that they maybe don't need as many supports? Who are their relationships? Again, like we just talked about, who in their family, in their community, in their friend group can kind of step up or be a person that they can call. I think of a family that it didn't look like the mom was going to get custody of her daughter, but they developed a plan, and she had 2 people she could call at any time, day or night, and that was really successful. So the importance of relationships, as we've already touched on today. Eligibility specific. So these services would be like DDS services, Mass Health, SSI, something that you have to fit a certain demographic, and there's probably a process in order to become eligible. Community-based resources. Is there a gym that you go to? Is there a local establishment that you go to on a regular basis? What are the different places in the community, and how, again, can we use those? As well as technology. Technology has come a long way for all of us, which is great. So there's lots of different apps that can be used. There's smartphones, smart devices, and how can we make sure that the support somebody has, maybe from 9 to 5, carry over for those other hours. And so in the video, we're going to see the importance of how the relationships and community base can work together, or maybe the technology can help out with the eligibility specific supports. Next. This is like a 2-minute video, and then we'll go into the 2 examples.
So people have asked me, where did the star come from? And I want you to understand that where the star came from was we started thinking about, if you think about circles like this and you think about anybody's life, you're an individual, a person with strengths and resources. You have family and friends, which is usually the next ring. And then the outer ring is really what we talk about in terms of community. And, when we start thinking about the history of the disability service system, what has started to happen inside the service system unintentionally is that we've really created a lot of supports for that person, whether it's special education, whether it's adult services, whether it's recreation specific to people with disabilities. And if you think about it, we've thought about every life domain, and we've thought about what are all the different programs that we could put around a person. And unintentionally, when we were doing that, those supports themselves actually became that barrier to the relationships and to the friendships and to accessing things in the community. So what the star does, and what it does for me is it kind of changes that whole entire conversation. And it says, let's take that individual, let's think about their strengths. Let's think about the people in their family and their relationships and their friends that are important to them. Let's think about the community that they live in. Let's think about the technology that they access. And let's figure out a way that we can integrate and we can place those and utilize those and leverage the different parts of the star. How can I use paid services to fund some technology so that I can talk to my friends so they can help me get to my job? How can I utilize paid services to fill some gaps? The idea is how are we helping our services and supports not become that barrier to those relationships, but rather really integrate, connect, and leverage them?
Great, thanks. Next slide. And so the Charting the Life course is out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And like I said, they have a very informative website that you can check out. And I know that this is a little bit hard to see, and I apologize. And I think when you get it via email, it might be a little bit easier. We definitely tried to make it as clear as possible. But this is more of like a systems integrated support star for supporting parents with intellectual disabilities. And what you can see here are just the variety of different supports that are available. So if we go back again, always starting with strengths, parents are motivated, they love their children, maybe they have some great communication skills, they persevered through many different things, they're determined, resilient, have some independent living skills. And so how can we take those and move those in with their relationships that we've talked a lot about, their neighbors, maybe peer mentors, or the parent-to-parent mentoring program from Family Ties. And then when we look at the eligibility specific supports, kind of filling in those open holes, we think about the DDS family support centers, intensive flexible family supports, individualized home supports or agency with choice, flexible funding. And then through the Department of Public Health, there's early intervention, the Department of Children and Families, parent training and parent resource centers. There's a ton of eligibility specific resources. We could go through all the housing resources and all the food resources, but lots of different things. And then we can also think about community-based resources for parents with IDDD. So Children's Trust Fund has a whole bunch of different things that they are able to offer. Healthy Families Program, the family centers, adult education, public schools, the Federation for Children with Special Needs, faith-based organizations, YMCA, and then, so there's lots of different options. And so sometimes if you're looking for at a family and it doesn't look like there's a whole lot going on for them, this can just help you kind of sort it out. It also gives them a sense of, okay, these are the things that are working and these are the things I need to work on. It can be a much more visual way for visual learners too, and other learners to kind of see those different things. And then lastly, technology. How can we use this? Smartphones, cameras, alarms. You know, Betsy even talked about like the window or the door alarm, something similar. So there's lots of different devices that you can use. Easter Seals has a lot of resources on assistive technology as well. And maybe you know, like she said in the video, maybe you're using some of your eligibility specific resources to get the technology. So that is kind of a systems look at charting the life course in the integrated support star. And then next, we're going to finish up with, next slide, please, with Daniel, who Judy has been talking about, the young man who grew up in the institution and raised his two sons. And we thought that he would be a great person to kind of look at us a integrated support star for, and just kind of what were his supports that made him so successful over such a long period of time. So again, starting with some of his personal strengths, really personable, positive, committed, friendly, likable, dedicated, hardworking, and also he would ask for help, which is a huge strength. Not everybody is able to do that, but he was able to do that. And so then he took those strengths and he used them in all the other aspects of the star. So the relationships that he had his wife, who he was very committed to, his two sons, one with a disability, one without. As a community member, everybody in the community knew who he was. He had multiple jobs, and the co-workers there supported him because he was so hardworking and so likable. And then he was also a regular at community events. So that kind of provided a protective factor for both him and his family. If they would know that if he was there, they would approach him and say hello, and it would just provide kind of those natural supports. Also, he had a lifelong friend, Jimmy, who is mentioned there, who was able to provide transportation to places that might not have been accessible by the bus. And then Daniel, different points. You know, he receives family support through DDS, employment supports, residential supports when his son became an adult, Department of Transitional Assistance supports, SSI, housing supports, mass health, as well as supports from the school system, which could go both in eligibility specific or community based. I mentioned a little bit about the community piece, being an active member of the community. He had lots of places that he would go on a regular basis, and so everybody knew him. If he was feeling lonely, he didn't have to go too far to receive some support. It wasn't waiting for a case manager to show up 1 hour a week, although I know that was helpful for him as well. He was involved in Special Olympics as well as a bowling league. So he had some structure to his life. He had some places where he knew he could go, places where he worked, where he was seen as a colleague, places where he could play sports. So he could really kind of look at all the aspects of his life and enjoy them. Technology, this guy Daniel's a little bit older, so I thought about Judy's example of showing up at, you know, once Gunsmoke was half over. So they used the TV to help them tell time, the alarm clock to get to work, microwave to, you know, prepare meals and things like that. So again, it's a different perspective on this man that we've been talking about through both presentations. I think that this can, you know, provide a lot of validation for professionals and individuals, and it can also spark some really interesting conversations. So again, I encourage you to check out the website for Charting the Life course. There are a variety of resources there, including this blank one of this integrated support star.
Thanks, Paula. That was so informative. I just wanted to know if there's anyone who had a question regarding this. We have a couple of extra minutes. They could chat it in now for Paula. If not, we can wait to the end.
Or even if maybe you have some supports that you've used for parents with intellectual disabilities that you've worked with, going back to the previous star that you think would be helpful.
All righty, well, if you want to think about that, and again, we'll have a question and answer period coming up shortly, and maybe you can ask the questions then. Next, I'm going to be introducing two more speakers, and they are representing the primary state agencies that provide the majority of funding supports. And we'll discuss the interagency collaboration and the Mass statewide partnership for supporting parents with ID and DD. First, we will hear from Tara Diario-Thomas, the Program Stabilization Operator Coordinator of Mass Department of Children and Families. And then we'll hear from Margaret Van Gelder, State Director of Family Support of the Department of Developmental Services. Tara?
Hey everyone, thank you. As Sue mentioned, I'm Tara Diario-Thomas. I work for DCF Central Office for the Services Network. So DCF's partnership with this group resulted as an emerging need for the services to support parents living with ID and DD was really evident. We had done a bunch of just groups gathering information about gaps in services, and this was one that seemed to always kind of come up. So throughout the last year or so, we've been working together as a group, and we've formalized collaboration and have continued creating energy and momentum towards continued collaboration. So our focuses really have been on identifying needs within a system, building capacity and expertise, creating a network, recognizing overlap, navigating systems issues that make it difficult to get services, developing a resource guide, and developing a forum and training opportunity to offer to providers working with parents with IDDD, which this is what we're doing today. So what I did want to mention was that DCF does have a few specific contracted services that work specifically with our IDDD population, but unfortunately those services do not cover the span of our entire state. So, we can only use it in specific geography, but we're feeling like, by continuing to collaborate within this group, that we can focus our needs for the end goal of being able to connect parents with services that are long-term and ongoing, which is really our long-term goal. I mean, a lot of the services that DCF provide are shorter term, but the hope is that even those shorter term services can help connect to this longer term vision that we have. And so I just wanted to say, as we were going through the training, I was kind of scrolling through the participants. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that I see all your names that are familiar to me. So it's so great that you guys took the opportunity to be part of this because we were really hoping that we would have a good turnout, which it seems like we really have had such a great interest in this. By your participation, it really helps us understand that the interest out there exists and that we're doing this for the right reasons. And again, just thank you so much for joining. I think that's all from me.
All righty, Margaret? Hey. Aging Margaret, there she is.
Didn't unmute correctly the first time. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be part of this presentation. I want to thank again Sue, Betsy, Judy, and Paula for kind of sharing their experiences. Over the years, there's been, kind of different peaks and valleys around focus around supports for parents who live with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I think some of the folks presenting here have been part of that history all along. And when we kind of hear about your many years of experience and some of the programs that you've been involved in, you really can provide a lot of insight and help, I think, elevate sort of the needs of this group. And so it was really about a year ago or so, and I want to credit one of my colleagues at DDS, Doug McCallum, who's really always been a huge proponent and ally in really thinking about how can we better support some of the adults and individuals we know and serve through DDS to better parent and to be more successful parents. And so we really convened this roundtable, and we're really pleased to begin to, I think, collaborate and coordinate more with some of our sister agencies, such as the Department of Children and Families, Children's Trust, and to sort of partner with providers and really understand and hear more about what's happening. And there is a lot more happening out there And we realized and people really able to use some of the existing program models and structures to sort of support families in very different ways. But what we recognize, and I think the case studies or examples you shared today really demonstrate the importance of lifelong, long-term supports, continuity, that case management, that relationship building. So I think it's really helping us think more strategically and help communicate better. What are all the different programs, services, options that are out there, and how do we help build in those transitions as people might need to move from one agency to another because of eligibility criteria, age, or different, for different reasons, because there's time limits on programs. How do we sort of create a more seamless approach to supporting families? So we, following this roundtable, we came up with a number of areas that we really want to focus in on, some of which Tara already mentioned. We've had to sort of pivot a bit, because of the COVID pandemic in terms of some of our timelines or how we thought we might proceed. We were hoping to be able to host a conference in the fall, that might need to be a little bit later, but we'd really like to have an opportunity to bring in other speakers and really sort of do a deeper dive in a lot of life areas and aspects of what it takes to support parents. We're pretty far along in the development of a resource directory that will be available to everyone that really can help look at both, what are some of the agency services, but what are a lot of those other community resources, and what are some of those technology resources, really using that kind of integrated STAR framework as an approach. And I think most importantly, we want to really think about how do we build more capacity and create a network for people who are interested in this or struggling with this or want to learn more, because we obviously, as Tara mentioned, have a great turnout here. So we have people who are experiencing this and would like to learn more or would like to connect with other people. Because as we know, there's a lot of great resources, but it's not like, a one size fits all. It's going to be very individualized, very customized. You'll learn a lot through experience. So it's really how can we create more of a learning community, create a network, provide some mentoring. So we're kind of also eager to hear from you as a group, through the chat and any follow-up in the evaluation about what would be some of the kind of next steps we could take that would feel helpful and supportive to you in your efforts in the work you do in your programs or in your work with families. And we'd like to think about how can we fill in some of those gaps or build some of the capacity like that exists at the United Arc or the history that Communitas has developed, so that we can begin to have that available in other parts of the state, as well as create opportunities for people to connect with one another who want to learn from each other as well. I also want to mention that we're kind of fortunate here in Massachusetts to have a national center on parents with disabilities, which is at Brandeis University. And we've had some initial outreach and have had some presentations from staff who work there. And I feel like it's another great resource we can sort of bring to the table. And I know that there's some work going on there around supporting parents who experience mental illness, and some initiatives going on at the Department of Mental Health. And I know that in some of the comments after the last training, that was an area people expressed some interest in as well. So I think that also lends itself to sort of expanding our partnership a bit, and how do we bring in folks from DPH. So we see this as kind of a beginning. We really want to continue to create some momentum. We want to think about, some of the structures and resources we can sort of help support you in the work you're doing. And so really look forward to kind of hearing some ideas, and we'll be following up with, some other ideas for next steps as well as hopefully, by early fall, being able to share that resource directory with all of you. I mean, to me, again, I think listening to the presentations both times, and in particular today, it just reinforced how critical it is. It really does take a village, right, to raise a child, and that it really is a matter of how to sort of identify and weave together a lot of different resources, both natural supports, family resources, different community resources, different programmatic, school-based resources and services, So it's that kind of case management role, facilitation of all those networks. So anyway, I again want to thank the presenters. I know we're going to sort of transition to some other questions or feedback. So really encourage people to use this opportunity through the chat, or if you're able to unmute yourself to kind of pick the brains of our presenters and share with us any other ideas. Thanks.
Thanks, Margaret. All right, we're going to open it up for questions and answers, and Betsy's going to facilitate this portion. So again, any questions, comments, suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. It's a quiet bunch.
I'm curious if there's, if people want to not chat and they just want to, kind of do it verbally versus, because it doesn't sound like we have a big rush. So anybody have any questions? I did put some links to the Brandeis stuff. So there's the Lurie, what is it called? The Lurie Institute.
Yes.
And then I also put in there the Parents with Disabilities link. So if you go to those links, there's actually a bunch of webinars, there's handouts, there's all kinds of trainings, there's handouts for parents. There's also stuff there that our parents can use. There's parent training and parent geared materials as well. Is the main, okay, so here, oh, Felicia, sorry. The main barrier for expanding these services, availability of program staff, or ability of funding, accessibility of funding. Well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Tara, and you can jump in here too. I think that it's been my impression that in terms of DCF and or DDS, that the services are needed in other areas. And so that could mean that DCF has funding to provide to agencies, but that maybe there's not the capacity there, or there's not the formalized type of program. Because I guess after the last session, I really feel like a lot of us are doing this work. A lot of you are doing this work too, but it's a little more informal, right? You're just kind of doing it. And so I guess my question is, like, for DCF, I think that they might, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tara, like to see other programs that they can contract with to do this work for this specific population.
Well, yeah, so this is Tara. So I think that, the other piece to this is that you're correct in saying that, we do only have like identified a couple providers that specifically do this like very particular work, right? But I think that it's very evident that all of you do this work. And I think that the reason why we don't, and it really doesn't have that much to do about funding, it has more to do with our procurement. So we don't have an open procurement right now, which means we cannot have specific providers coming in to provide a service without, doing a bid, and we don't have that open right now. So I think that, really what my intention was, and really have been kind of advocating throughout this process of being part of this group, is that we do have tons of providers that work with families who really meet this profile. And I think that the more education and tools we can give, the work can happen. So that was my hope today with people. And like I said, I saw so many names that were familiar to me. It was really great to see all of you taking this opportunity. I do think that, down the line, when we do in fact have an open procurement and are looking for services, that there will probably be a specific, ask for services with this specialty. But I think overall, I think that, like some people have said, and what Betsy mentioned, is that this really is the work is being done. It is being done a little bit less formally. And I think the more the tools that we can give and the more education opportunities, I think the better. So I think that hopefully that answers the majority of the question.
Great. So we have another question. I'm sure you were all reading this too. I'm working with a couple. I'm assuming that's DCF worker, describe them as developmentally delayed, but they do not identify themselves as having a developmental delay. I agree. That's most of the families that we work with as well. Not open to services. That's a different issue. I think that I don't think that you have to, so a lot of the families that we work with do not have a diagnosed disability. Most of the families that we work with are this kind of borderline marginal group of people who are having some functional limitations and some challenges in their parenting role, but also in their role just in general. But I don't think that they always identify as having a disability. So I think that you can kind of put that piece aside to some extent. And I think if they're not open to services, some of the stuff that I do in terms of not open to services is I will bring a family coffee, or I'll say, hey, I mean, maybe not now during COVID, but what I would say was, hey, you know, let's go to Dunkin' Donuts. I'll get you a coffee. Or let's go, you know, let's go to McDonald's and hang out there and just check in and see what I can help you with. It's not going to be successful in every instance, but I think it's that piece around families feeling like they're going to get something out of the service, that we're not just in their lives, again, to tell them what to do or because they have DCF, but that there's a benefit to participating. And I think it's a challenge. We definitely have been there with some families. And like I said, some families we can work through it, some families we can't. People have to be open, right, to receive services and to make change. And if they're not open, you know, we can try and convince them, but it's not always going to be successful. So I think it's building the relationship. It's providing concrete benefits.
And I think one of the other things, Betsy, is we've had families that we initially started to work with and they weren't ready.
It was the ice machine, dude.
And then they are ready.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, okay, another question. It seems like some families get these services when their children are referred to DDS system and the needs of the parent becomes more apparent. I completely agree. I think that we work with families through family support who do not have DCF involved, and the parents living with an ID or DD, and that we just do the kind of family work anyway. Should I say that? In front of the funder? I mean, I think, you know, I think that we do what we can do. And if that means, you know, filling out mass health applications for parents when the child's eligible, we probably are going to do it anyway. But I think, you know, that's also obviously in our work, like a boundary issue and, you know, a supervisory issue, right? But I think it's hard to be in a family's home and see a need that we could easily help them with, and to choose not to do that, I think that's a complicated thing, right? I don't know if somebody else wants to chime in there.
Yeah, I'll chime in.
Okay, thanks, Judy.
Yeah, we work with a number of families whose sons or daughters are identified as and eligible for DDS services, and the parents have intellectual disabilities. And we work with them. We provide navigation as we would with any other family that we work with. The skills that we use may be different and the techniques, but the service is the same. Mm-hmm. So we help people to navigate the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, interesting. So, that's to me. So it says there's much better research based in England and Scandinavian countries. I totally agree. Iceland, believe it or not, we had a conference in Seattle and we had how many people? 20 people from Iceland showed up?
More than that, I think. It was 30. It was amazing.
Yeah, so they're doing some really, really amazing work. They are doing some, you know, there's international research going on. Research in the United States. Sue, you wanna?
Some research that's going on. I know Dr. Sandra Azar through Clark University has been doing some research. Again, Brandeis is also doing some research. I believe through the Looking Glass out in California is also connected with that. Oh, I'm not going to remember. Help me, Betsy. The folks. Oh, I'm slipping it. I'm not going to remember it.
Not Tracy La Liberté.
Thank you. Yeah, where are they?
She's,
Minnesota.
where's she at?
Minnesota. They're from Minnesota. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So there are some pockets that are definitely going on. I'm very thrilled that we're having such a great conversation, but unfortunately, it's now time for our session to end. So this might be something to think about and building upon for next time. So that's wonderful. So thank you everyone for participating today and your enthusiasm and your interest in learning how to provide very positive and supporting services to our families. Thank you, ArcMass, for hosting, and Carrie for helping out, our presenters, our speakers, and the partnership, and all of you for participating. Please make sure to fill out your evaluations. And if you have not gotten the PowerPoint or handouts from last time, maybe reach out to Carrie, and I know she's going to be sending the information out today. Thank you everyone so much, really appreciate it. And as we get moving in more directions and that resource book becomes available, we'll be reaching out. Thank you all. Take care. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Hi, great job.
Bye-bye. Take care. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
I was trying to be incognito.
Well, see, that's because I know you so long. Take care.